Hello, welcome to AQS Inmate Call, the show that exposes the internal workings of the Department of Corrections in the state of Washington. And I am your host, Joel Wilborn. Now, in this episode, I would like to discuss the criminal aspect of the Department of Corrections. Now, if you look through news reports and the history of any state's DOC, you're not going to see a lot of DOC officials who were arrested and jailed or imprisoned. It does happen. Same thing with law enforcement, same thing in the judicial system. You know, there's district attorneys and there's attorneys and there's law enforcement officers, sheriff's deputies, all these folks that will commit a crime and they'll get convicted and they'll serve some time. That's not unusual. But imagine a department like the Department of Corrections where rarely anybody gets convicted. The Washington State Department of Corrections, they have a habit of, when a person gets in hot water, to transfer that person. So maybe an assistant superintendent is abusing his authority, and there's some complaints and people are threatening lawsuits. One day there's early retirement, or the assistant superintendent just gets transferred out of state or to another facility or maybe to a desk job. That we can see, and it's not hard to find it, but you do have to do some digging to get that information. I usually get it secondhand through some of the incarcerated people telling me in an email or on the phone, or even family members were telling me. So I don't experience it directly. And after years of working with incarcerated people and behind the scenes with the DOC, trying to get information on it, I actually got a chance to do some firsthand experience with this type of behavior, and it was like a little winning a prize or something, because I work, fight, and then suddenly I'm giving this opportunity on a silver platter. Of course, I'm going to take full advantage of it and do it the way I've always wanted to do it. Now, when I hear about a problem, particularly medical, I've had a lot of people, and some of them ask me specific, if I have this symptom, what's going on? And I'll have to talk to professionals, like medical professionals, or I'll consult some books or stuff online to get information for them. And of course, I'm not a medical expert, so I just let them know that, based on what I found out on the internet and found out by talking to people, this is what it could look like. And of course, I'm always recommending, and even if you run it through AI, they're always recommending that you talk to a professional. And these people are professionals because they've studied this field for so long. They don't have 100% of the answers, but they know better. They have a better opportunity to give you a more helpful answer than somebody who's just figuring it out through reading and research. And when I do that, the people do tend to go to the actual professionals, because it just kind of highlights it. If I've got these symptoms, what's going on? I suggest something, and then, oh my goodness. So then that way, when they go into the doctors, like, I suspect that this is what's wrong. And that helps. And if the doctors are saying, okay, let's look into it and find out that this person has a very serious illness or ailment, then we want to take some action. I always suggest that they take the person to court. But they have to take notes, and they have to run through the system. They'll have to go through the office of the ombudsman, or they'll have to file a complaint with the Department of Corrections, let their family members know, and even consult an attorney. And I'm hoping that it could go to court. And in my particular case, that's what I want to do. But here's the thing. You have these little things called a plea bargain. Now, when people take a plea bargain, I know when I was in law enforcement, I'd go through a lot of trouble if I'd try to convict a person. But if they're sitting down with the DA and they're sitting down with law enforcement and maybe some judges and family members and come up with a plea deal, it's almost like a slap in the face for law enforcement with all the work they did. But the fact that we did this work and caught the person, that's the ultimate goal. Not necessarily locking the person up, but getting the person off the street, finding out who committed this crime, especially the violent crime. And there's a lot of families out there whose loved one was murdered, and the murderer was caught and works out a plea deal. And you might say, this person should just get executed or go to prison for life. But maybe the loved one's missing. This person says, yes, I killed this individual, but I will only give up the location of the body if you work a deal out with me. And it's a shame. And in a lot of cases, when you talk to the victim's family, they're saying, I wish it could have been done another way. But let's face it, the ultimate solution to something like that is to bring the loved one back. And there's no plea deal out there. I mean, of course, everybody would support that, but there's no plea deal out there that can bring a person back or undo the damage or the harm that was done. So there are times plea deals are just the only and best alternative to, just no plea deal at all. And so with corporate America, that's a very common thing. A business is doing well, and then something happens and there's a lot of complaints. And maybe there's this chance of going to court, and the company could be charged so much in fines and penalties that it goes out of business. There could be close to $1 trillion worth of damages that need to be paid out. And so to avoid all that negative publicity, the companies tend to want to talk with people and work something out. And that's happened in the DOC. I know in the mail facilities in the state of Washington, there are people that will say, you're doing all these things wrong. I'm going to file some complaints. And maybe they actually go and start getting the paperwork ready. And then the officials come in, sit down and say, okay, look, we'll give you $250,000 or $25,000 range just to shut them up. And then they get this non-disclosure agreement where they're not allowed to talk about it. That's part of the deal. If they wind up talking to me or the press or their family members and it gets out there, then all bets are off. And that happens more often than you think. I've seen a lot of people that become millionaires and they get big settlements, and that's them. Me personally, I wouldn't do that, but I don't understand their full background or why they're doing it, and I'm not going to argue with it if that's what they want to do. But when they ask me what should I do, I immediately say go to court. Don't do this non-disclosure agreement, and certainly don't settle for something. And when I was working with Paula Gardner and she settled for $9.9 million, the whole time I was telling her we need to go to court and that's what we need to talk about. And then after it was all said and done, she said, well, I got cancer and I thought I was going to die. I wasn't going to be around for the trial. I wanted to get it over quickly. And she didn't need to explain it to me. I wasn't very happy, but I'm glad she did. And I'm pretty sure it was deeper than that, but that it just explains that not everybody wants to go to trial, and they have their reasons. I do, and I suggest that to people: go to trial. In my particular situation, I want to go to trial. If the people are found innocent, that's great. Continue on. If they're found guilty, I think personally that going to trial will and making this thing public and getting a conviction, somebody's has the handcuffs on and taken off. I think other DOC officials will say, I don't want that to happen to me. Now, for me, they want to block me from talking to people. They want to block the people from calling me, block the people from writing me a letter, block me from contacting them, which is a violation of my right to free speech and theirs. And that's one of the things I'm going to fight. Now, just recently, they did just lift it, as if like, oh, okay, we've restated everything. But for years, I was blocked, and I had to go through third party to get stuff. And so blocking me isn't going to stop me from broadcasting this to you guys. But maybe locking me up and putting me in prison would. But you have to have a crime in order to do that. And once again, that's prison. And that's, I think, something that might work with these DOC officials, instead of having them say we can do whatever we want, and if it gets out of hand, all we have to do is pay thousands of dollars. And that's what happens in the private sector. With capitalism, there's an urge to make money and produce, hopefully, a very good product. When we're looking at robots that could help defuse bombs, or that can go down into caverns and deep ocean areas to locate missing objects or find people that are lost, or even eliminate some suspects or something. If we can have technology do that, I think we're going to be moving ahead in the right direction. I like stuff like that. But when when you're looking at the corporate America and making money, and people know they're doing something wrong, and there's complaints, your product's making me sick, or it breaks down after just a few months, and they just want to pay you to be quiet, I don't really see that as helping anything or anybody. And that's one of the things that I look at when I'm given this information from the prisons. And when I read something, they give a lot of detail, but they talk to both sides. In many cases, they do. A lot of times the defendants don't want to speak. But when you do some deep research, you talk to family members, you talk to the victims, you look at history, and you write up this story that's entertaining and that's interesting to people, to the point where they want to tune in, and you can get good advertisement for it. But what if you are looking at TV on a special, and they're talking about some of the things that's going on in the prison? Let's say, for example, there's some contaminated water in the prison, and people are drinking it. Maybe hundreds of people are getting sick, and 2 die. And then the prison wants to hide it, and anybody who writes about this, it's censored. And phone calls, censored. So any outgoing letters, any outgoing emails, any outgoing phone calls, any visits are all censored or restricted or even denied. So nobody knows what's going on in there. And they'll call people into the office. If you share this with anybody, we're going to take away your good time, and you'll be here a year longer than you're supposed to be. Or you won't have a chance to choose where you go for your release area. They'll like Renee was talking about in the podcast that I did earlier. They'll retaliate. And a lot of people who are in prison, they just want to get out quickly. And if they're threatened like that, they tend to buckle under. And there's that one little thing that comes out with the money. We'll give you $1 million if you just shut up. And so we're not seeing what's going on inside the prison. And they have that ability to lock it. Corporate America, they don't. But they may have a big bank account. And so when people are just going through all this suffering and they're willing to pay this and get them to shut up, we don't know their situation. They could accept that. And then the business gets this little thing about all we have to do is just pay them and this goes away. That's something you see on movies with the mafia. Everybody can be bought. And with the DOC, they think like these gangsters. We'll pay them off. It's like paying off the judge, paying off the jury, paying the sheriff's department. And that is a legal way of getting away with a lot of dirty stuff. Just because when you want to keep somebody quiet, there's no law that forbids you from offering something to them, especially if the two of you agree. And so, a big thing is maybe a prostitute gets upset at one of her johns and say, "Hey, I will broadcast this and tell everybody what you've been doing. And if it's going to hurt this John's reputation," he might say, "Name your price." And then it goes away. And it can get to the person's head, and all I have to do is just pay on average this much money, and I can pretty much get away with anything. And I wish the public knew a little bit more about this. And I'm hoping if we can get enough of this out there, folks will understand. If a person goes to prison, is treated very badly, and goes through all this stuff, and then gets out and wants to file a lawsuit or broadcast the information, it becomes difficult, and it's very hard to believe the person. It's like, really? All this happened to you? Why didn't you say anything when you were in there? And the answer is going to be, well, I couldn't, or I was too scared, or I was threatened, and I was trying to get it out, it was censored, or it was lost. I filled out the wrong form, used the wrong paperwork, the wrong color ink. And this practice continues on. So that's why I suggest, and I'll suggest to you, and hopefully you can tell your loved ones as well, in any state, in any DOC, keep notes. Share as much as you can. Talk to the professionals. If you have an opportunity to talk to an attorney, speak to an attorney. Some people have an opportunity to talk to judges. If you can talk to law enforcement, if you can talk to medical professionals. But so that when the loved one gets out of prison, and this could be you too, and you're sharing this information, it's easier to believe when there's a paper trail. I've created a huge paper trail, and that's because of my experience. I was in law enforcement. I studied government. I understand the things that these people look for. And I've had great success fighting the government in other departments as well. And that's because of my experience. And what I want to do is share that with others. And yeah, a lot of the stuff that I share with end up in out of court settlement. But one day, someone besides me is going to be able to take it to court. And I know there's a couple of people right now working on some stuff. And I'm going to support this 100%. And even if they do settle, at least we've got some paperwork going. And we've got the story that we can share. So that's what I want to do. And I'm hoping this message gets out to you and people you might know who's in prison or working with prison. There's a lot of prison advocacy groups out there. Let them know that we can't keep doing the same thing we've been doing. If we have an issue, it disappears because of a payoff. It's going to keep going. The medical problem, Paula got $9.9 million. Her cancer didn't go away. I mean, it's in remission. That's good. But it eventually could come back and take her life. And if she hadn't have gone to prison, there's a real good chance she never would have gotten cancer. But because of their neglect in prison, she got it. And the settlement, even though it doesn't prove any guilt, it shows that they felt that in order to stop this from getting out to the public in detail, they needed to do something. And what kind of benefit did Paula get from this? But one thing she says, and that other folks say too, is if we can help somebody else, let's do it. And the medical practice or mispractice, misconduct is still going on in the prisons, even after losing all that money. And she got the largest payoff in a while. But I've seen others that are just not broadcast. We don't hear about. And we need to stop that. And I know another thing for the plea deals and out-of-court settlements is to cut down on the court docket. We don't want 5,000 cases to go across the courts, every week or so, when we can cut it down. And I look for ways to prevent going to court too, because to me, giving me my rights, treating me as a human being, is more important than cash settlement. And I would rather have them treat me properly, the way my constitutional rights show that I should be treated, than to be paying me a bunch of money every week and to keep treating me like I'm nothing. Who would want to be treated unfairly, get a terminal illness, all just for some money? I can't imagine somebody showing up at your front door and saying, we're willing to give you $5 million if you'll take a test that will give you cancer that will kill you in 6 years. I doubt too many people would say, okay, I'll do that. There are a few, out there that are just destitute and they're probably suicidal and life doesn't mean much to them, which is a shame. But let's face it, that's what people are. And the court system should work to help people not want to give up on life, not want to put themselves into a situation where their rights don't matter and that they have to accept that. But I think going to court, maybe, just maybe, will work. So hopefully this will spark some conversation. But I'm asking, stay vocal, stay strong, and know what you want before you dive into a system that is corrupt and that is willing to throw money at you just to get you to stop.